Hi, I'm Richard Vague. In prior videos, we've already discussed the housing market and our belief that the very low supply of unsold housing inventory puts a floor on how bad a recession can be. Stated simply, the housing market is generally the key to any boom or bust in the U.S. economy. And unsold home inventory reached an unprecedented 4 million before the great financial crisis, which made certain the pain of that crisis. But now that number is only 850,000 homes, less than a fourth of what it was then, and it's the lowest number in decades. Now that means we have an undersupply of homes currently. Therefore, whenever housing mortgage rates go lower, reasonable growth will resume. So let's take a closer look at commercial real estate, or CRE, where a rising chorus of voices are predicting trouble, among them the legendary Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. And that concern stands to reason. The pandemic has destroyed the office market as we know it, and the internet had been ravaging the retail space market for a decade or more prior to that, though as an aside, it simultaneously created a boom in industrial warehouse supply chain space market. The first thing to note is the relative size of the housing mortgage market versus the commercial real estate lending market. Residential home lending stands at $13.4 trillion, whereas the CRE lending market is less than half that size at $6 trillion. So problems in the CRE market are less impactful to the economy as a whole. The key to understanding the risk in any market, including the commercial real estate market, is whether or not there's a substantial level of overcapacity. Normally, we would look to the amount of new construction and also the amount of new lending within the CRE sector to determine that. Here we can see that the commercial construction level is well below that existed prior to the GFC, and the growth in commercial mortgages has been flat relative to GDP. So these specifically do not point to concern. However, as is clear, the pandemic has led to a permanent reduction in the ongoing need for office space and thus has brought a high level of overcapacity. Cushman & Wakefield estimates that the U.S. office market be saddled with 330 million square feet of obsolete space by the end of the next decade, which, with a cost estimate of no more than, let's say, $300 per square foot, would indicate a problem of roughly $100 billion. We've seen other estimates that put the loss in the CRE market, or the office space market specifically, as high as $500 billion. So somewhere north of $100 billion perhaps. But that's a small fraction of the housing market losses in the GFC, and it will occur over several years and will understandably be mitigated by the creativity, repurposing, and other devices of that industry. And that'll all happen within a lending industry that now has $2.2 trillion in capital. One more trouble spot will likely be multifamily. You can see here that since 2014, multifamily mortgages have grown considerably as a percent of GDP. But the size of mortgages to that sector is only $2 trillion. So a worst case estimate of losses there would be, let's say, $100 to $200 billion. One factor that will help force the realization of this bad news is that so many of these loans will mature and need to be refinanced at much higher rates over the next couple of years. So will there be problems in commercial real estate? Yes, but they'll be manageable and nowhere near the problems seen in the GFC. As for the overall economy, our prediction remains that the worst case is a slowdown or perhaps an ordinary recession, and the Fed will have the power to quickly overcome that with lower rates, since housing inventory is in somewhat of a gross undersupply. That's very different than 2010, where lowering rates did nothing because we had an oversupply of homes. In this case, since there's an undersupply, lowering rates will create upward momentum for that industry and for the economy as a whole. Reminder, this is a prediction for GDP growth and not for the stock market. We'll save that prediction for another session. Thanks, and we'll talk next week.